Good evening, everyone, and welcome once again to the Writer's Room. I'm your co-host, Kat Rocha, the night editor, and with me, as always, is
J.Ishiro Finney, author and alien in a human suit.
Yes, and we have two very special guests this evening from Silver Empire Books. We have Russell Newquist and Morgan. I apologize, Morgan. Newquist, sorry. And I apologize, Morgan. I can't see your last name.
But they are both authors themselves, as I'm sure a
Yes.
lot of you are already aware. But on top of that, they run Silver Empire Publishing. Or is it Silver Empire Books?
Technically Silver Empire Publishing, but either way is fine.
And if you're not familiar with this company yet, you should be, because their catalog is like a one-stop place to find fiction that isn't going to insult you.
No, it's all good books, and as our own Fiona would put it, lots of good stories with pew pew.
It was a pew pew, and was it something ultra, or was it superversive?
Yep, superversive.
We're very big on the pew pew and the superversive for sure.
I keep telling her eventually she's got to submit to you guys.
Mm-hmm.
But so I will lead with the bad news on that, which is that we are not currently taking submissions from authors we don't already have a relationship with, because we are just too swamped with what we've got on deck. I'm sorry to report that. I get a lot of people actually get angry at me when I say that. I'm sorry. I really am. I would like to do more. But we have a large, we've been working through it, but we have a large backlog.
Well, then you know what? All of you writers out there, if you want to see them actually start opening up for submissions again, the only solution is to spend a lot of money on their store, which would justify more books.
Absolutely. That is the answer.
But we brought you on. Geez, it's been 2 years.
Yeah, it's been 2 years.
And in those 2 years, quite a bit has happened. Your catalog has grown substantially. So why don't you give a quick rundown to our listeners who the company is, who you guys are, and why it matters.
So I'm Russell Newquist, as you introduced me before, and my wife Morgan. We run the company together. It kind of started as a we were writing some stuff ourselves, and we thought, hey, I'm assuming a bunch of nerds in your audience, so I'm going to go old school, back to the Legend of Zelda quote. It's dangerous to go alone, right? So we thought, hey, this is better in numbers, and better to get other people involved. And I see a question in the chat about Paula Ritchie signed up as Silver Empire, and yes, she is one of our authors. Her book, Penance, is in our Heroes Unleashed shared universe, and it's fantastic. The whole Heroes Unleashed whole thing is phenomenal. We'll talk about that more later.
Yeah, definitely.
But getting back to that, we started out publishing our own stuff, and then we kind of picked up a few other authors, and then it just kind of grew from there. We've been unbelievably fortunate in the authors we've picked up. I can't believe how many amazing authors have come to us with some absolutely phenomenal books, and we've just, that's kind of spiraled from there. And we kind of got into it. A lot of what you said in the beginning, we were looking at a lot of the mainstream publishing stuff that is, either not our stuff, not our, forcing politics down our throat that's not us, or downright insulting us. In some cases, companies actually directly insulting authors. We've seen that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And also directly insulting some readers. We've seen that happen. And our stuff, I won't say, well, we have some stuff that is definitely political. We have folks like Declan Finn, who's the first book in his St. Tommy series is literally about a mad abortion doctor. So we definitely have stuff that's political, but it's not our primary focus either. And we're just trying to have stories that are great fun. That's really our number one criteria is it fun? And I think that every book we publish really meets that criteria myself, or I wouldn't publish it if I didn't think so. And that's kind of where we got going. I don't know if Morgan has more to add to that or not. I'll give her a minute to talk.
No, I was just mostly gonna. Paula Ritchie, since she came up, actually kind of gave us this tagline, in that we're kind of going in the direction that we're too Christian for mainstream publishing and too mainstream for Christian publishing. So like we occupy this weird space where we're not really Christian fiction, but many of our books have a lot of faith in it, and that's something that the industry is actually kind of hostile to. But it's not also like this kind of milquetoast trash that's kind of been associated with Christian fiction either.
We're not afraid to touch religion and faith in our books, and it's not just Christianity. We were talking before the show about Benjamin Chea, and his background being Asian is a very interesting mix of Christianity and Buddhism, and that shows through in his books, and it's really interesting. And we love being able to explore that sort of thing. Hey, Raleigh, see you in the comments there. Good to see you, my friend. Yeah, I mean, that's just we're not afraid to touch it. It's an area where a lot of modern publishing is just afraid to even go there, and we're not. But it's also not what we really define ourselves by. We just want to have a good story that is, not going to insult our readers, and just go have a good time.
Well, the thing I recall most importantly was that when I had read War Demons, which is your book, which is excellent, by the way. If you are into kind of the urban horror occult type stuff, it's well worth checking out. I didn't really even perceive it as being a Catholic book. I know you sold it as Catholic horror, but it did not come across as such to me.
Well, and so I'll talk about my own book for a second since you brought it up. My personal approach has been to have a book that is in a world that is explicitly the world building is explicitly Catholic and Christian. And it is, I am Catholic, so I'm going to start with that. But rather than building a supernatural world from scratch, my approach was, this already exists with hundreds of years of Catholic folklore. And, what if, crazy thought, to me, to who is Catholic, what if all the so-called Catholic mythology, the mythological sides, the fantastical sides, what if that's real? And assuming that is real, and also assuming the theology is real, and writing my world that way, but also purposefully did not want to beat people over the head with, you should be good Catholic, right? I just wanted to tell a good story set in that world. And at least for some readers, I've succeeded in that. And I'll take that as I get it, and leave it to the other readers to decide for themselves. But we have a gamut. We have a number of authors who are significantly less religious even than that in their writing. And then we have a number who are even more religious than that. Like, I mentioned Declan Finn earlier. His St. Tommy series is literally about a detective who fights demons with the powers of a saint. And it is very, very, very Catholic, not just Christian, but explicitly Catholic. And then you have on the other side, again, supernatural urban horror with Daniel Humphreys and his series, which, kind of has some hints of Christianity in it a little bit, but it's really, it's not a dominant theme in the story. but he does touch on it a bit, and he's got some of that in there too. So, we kind of like we've kind of let our authors run the gamut of what works for them, and again, what works for the story, and makes it for a good yarn.
Well, the thing that strikes me is that when people hear, and I brought this up last time we talked, is when they hear Christian or Catholic fiction, it really has the same ring as Christian rock did in the 80s. It's like, oh, okay, whatever.
And
you think of
there's unfortunately a very good reason for that.
Yeah.
And we know that, we're aware of that, and it makes marketing it very tough, because Christian fiction, I'm just going to be bluntly honest, most Christian fiction that's explicitly marketed as Christian fiction is garbage. It's boring, it's bad writing, it's
No,
boring
it's
stories.
it's right side message fiction.
It is message fiction, largely evangelical message fiction. I'll pick my sides in the theological debate for a moment. Although I will say that we have evangelicals that we publish too. We are not just Catholic, and we're okay with that. But it's beat you over the head message fiction. Here's a big thing that I'll explain is the difference between our books in general, all of ours, versus a lot of traditional Christian fiction, right? Traditional Christian fiction wants to sell you a world that is completely sanitized, where you have very clear anybody who commits the tiniest sin is evil, bad person, and anybody who's a good guy is perfect and dreamy, and everything works out for them in the end. And on our version, on all of them, is the real world that we live in, which is that people, even good people, are not perfect. People do things that are even good Christian people do things that are not good, right? We all make mistakes. In the Christian terminology, we're all sinners. And we're not afraid to show that in our fiction, to show that our heroes are not perfect people. And
that's good.
And it's because it's boring when they're perfect people, and it's boring when you're just lecturing to people about the morality of it all.
Well, what's interesting is your description of Christian fiction. Just replace Christianity with socialism, and you've got what we're being sold right now from the mainstream.
Well, I was also going to say, sounds like, the great thing about your stories is that, or the stories that Silver Empire publishes, is that you have actual characters, and characters have flaws, which means you don't have books chock full of Mary Sues, basically. And I know from some of the books that I'm familiar with, that definitely is not the case.
And one last thing I'd like to point out is that up until, I don't know, maybe the 90s, and even then, the vast majority of horror, even after Lovecraft, was essentially in a Christian universe. I mean, calling your book
very much so, very, very much, I agree with that 1,000%.
Yeah, but calling your book Catholic fiction is kind of like calling The Exorcist a Catholic movie,
So I will say my own book is it's funny because it's only been recently that I watched that movie. And I'll make a plug for something that has nothing to do with us. We watched there was a TV series, The Exorcist, a few years back. It only ran for 2 seasons, and then it got canceled. And we watched that. Morgan and I watched it together, and we were like, holy cow, this is the closest thing on TV to our books that we've ever seen. And we watched it, and it was great, and we loved it. And then we went back and watched the old movie from the 70s afterwards, and we're like, this isn't as good. But I will take your point very much. The example that I like to give is that Dracula is not a book one would lump under Christian fiction in any normal sense.
But it is.
And yet it is absolutely a Christian book. The entirety of the story, the entirety of the setting, and the mechanics in the world, and how things work is absolutely built around taking Christianity as a worldview for granted, right? He didn't even explain it. It's just taken for granted in there. And for myself, that was my own conscious approach to writing my book. Our authors have gone in different directions as far as how consciously they're in that mode or how direct they are with it. But that's the example that I like to give, and so much so that people get sick of hearing me say it. But it very much is. And I'll also note on the same comment that horror traditionally, part of what makes horror as a genre and part of what's traditionally been expected in horror as a genre is for it to be a morality tale. The classic trope in horror that everybody likes to pick on these days, you've got the monster going around killing everybody, and it's always killing, the classic. I think it's showing my age now, but when Scream the movie came out and was poking fun at the horror movie tropes, like the biggest one they're making fun of is as soon as somebody has sex, they die, right?
Yeah.
And but that kind of thing, like the classic horror movie trope, is that it is, the monster is coming back and is going after the people who have committed some kind of moral offense that ties into the nature of the creature, and that's a fundamental part of horror as a genre.
I'll go a step further. I would say that Christian theology and mythology was the basis for all Western horror until the 20s.
I absolutely agree with that. And I would also say it was the basis of 90% of it until the late 90s.
Yeah, I would agree. So, do you want to talk about your other big world? You've covered the urban horror, urban fantasy aspect of your company. You also do superheroes.
We do. And we have our own superhero shared universe, Heroes Unleashed. We mentioned it earlier. And I'm going to say a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it over to Morgan because she's actually been a lot more active in that. But we purposefully went and gathered together a number of absolutely phenomenal authors and asked them to help us create this series together. And basically, what we did, the way we approached it, was to get a handful of authors, get concepts from them for their own characters and what they wanted to do, and loosely tie it all together into a shared world, kind of the way the Marvel universe has worked historically, where you have all these characters and they have their own stories and they have their own things, but they live in the same world and interact with each other, and things that happen in one story affect the other story, although you don't have to read all the other stories in order to go and get them. Um, and so we kind of put those all together and let them write and let them share ideas. And I have to say that in my opinion, the results we got were far better than I ever expected and ever even dreamed. The books that our Heroes Unleashed authors have put out, and the amount that they've collaborated with each other behind the scenes and just started saying, "Hey, can I borrow this character? And wouldn't it be cool if we did this?" really has been phenomenal. And I'm going to turn it over to Morgan for a minute and let her talk, because she wrote the first book in the series, Heroes Fall, which if you have a chance, go check it out. The preview on Amazon, the prologue to that book is one of the most amazing things you'll ever read. I honestly believe that. Just it's that good. But I'll turn it over to her and let her talk for a minute.
Yeah. Did you have any like specific questions or points you wanted to bring up about Heroes Unleashed?
What is it? What is Heroes Unleashed?
It's like Russell said, it's our shared novel verse. So all of the Heroes Unleashed stories take place in the same world. Generally, though not always, each series is like a different city. So when you're looking at DC Comics, you know, Batman is in Gotham City and the Flash is in Star City and all of that. So that's what we've got. And it's based around, you know, the world events that happened. And then it just follows different superheroes through their adventures in novel form.
And what would be the tone of this universe? I mean, there's the larger than life DCU pantheon, and then there's the more soap opera-y, down to earth Marvel. And
right.
You had the Wild Card series from Martin and his friends, which was kind of just weird.
There's a little bit. It runs a little bit of the gamut because each author has their own tone and their own style. But I would probably put the general tone as maybe like Straczynski's Rising Stars. Slightly, for the most part, like a little bit grittier, slightly, I mean, I know it's like kind of got connotations, but slightly more realistic. Definitely, with the exception of Paula Ritchie's book, they're for teenagers or adults. They're not young adult or kid novels. And a lot of it's about kind of exploring the difficult questions on being a superhero, and everything is based around this big world event where basically the Superman of that universe went crazy one day and destroyed half of the big city, and it changed the world for regular people and superheroes forever after that. And the different books deal with kind of different aspects, I guess, of the blowback from that.
And your book, your character, what can you tell me about your character's journey dealing with that event? Well, yeah, who is your character, first of all, that you wrote in your first book?
So the main character in my first book, her name is Victoria. She does not have a superhero name because she doesn't want one, because she doesn't want to be a superhero, and that's not really what she's in it for. And she basically gets, by association, kind of pulled in to the event is called the Rampage, and she gets pulled into the 20-year anniversary aftermath of the Rampage. And yeah, she ends up discovering what actually happened to cause all of that to happen, and really realizing kind of the nature of how a lot of the superheroes in their world are. She knew it a little bit because she didn't want to be one, because at least in my books, they're kind of like Instagram influencers. So, like, you know, they all want their shot to the top, and they're going to do all kinds of things and record it and post it on social media and get sponsorships and all of that kind of thing to support their superhero lifestyle.
Do you have a Jake Paul superhero?
No, but that's an interesting idea.
It sounds like now I never read the books, but it sounds like a better, well-developed version of Mystery Men.
There's definitely parallels there. It's a bit more serious, and I say this, I've only actually seen the movie. I haven't read the comics it was based on, but it's more serious than that. But there's definitely parallels to that. It's also got some the world as a whole, and especially Morgan's books, actually, but all of them definitely also remind me a lot of The Boys, but less disgusting. And,
that's why I went with Mystery Men instead of The Boys.
And less dark. You know, there's definitely a lot of dark things that happen, but the story's not. The books aren't out to just outgross you every other page. But there's a lot of parallels to that kind of setting as well.
Yeah, The Boys is the most like it, although this came out way before The Boys did. Before The Boys were out, I used to say it's like it's just funny because I absolutely hate Watchmen, but it's It's Watchmen if it wasn't nihilist, like if
It's-
Alan Moore wasn't like
It's
No.
also
an
not
angry nihilist.
It's also not deconstructive in
It's
a way
not
that
deconstructive.
Okay,
either
thank
the
you.
boys or Watchmen are, but it does have a lot in common with what I consider to be the better parts of both of those, because I actually hate the deconstruction in Watchmen, and I really love the boys, and I wish it didn't make me want to throw up every other scene. I like it in spite of that, because I think it's got a lot in it, but that part, like, guys, you really don't have to go quite to that level.
And I, it's funny because it took me a long time to write this book. And the first, outline iteration, this was not true. But by the time I finished it, is that it's actually pretty dark and twisted, but overall, like, the end is hopeful and the whole thing is hopeful. It's subversive, not subversive, is the way that it ended up, despite me saying it's like the boys or Watchmen, is that it kind of goes, I want to say it kind of goes to that darkness, but instead of just keeping on digging once it hits rock bottom, it kind of,
There's a light at the end of the
yeah,
tunnel.
they shows the light at the end of the tunnel.
So, okay, I gotta ask the hard-hitting question here, especially because, as you've mentioned, this is a sandbox world that you have, multiple writers playing in, and each one is going to bring their own take, of superheroes to this world. The hard-hitting question is that there are so many superhero stories out there besides Marvel, DC. We've already mentioned so many of them. What is it that is different about your universe that is something new, or perhaps something that is missing from what's currently being offered, that superhero readers or those who are perhaps new to the genre can expect or can find?
Well, there's been more recently. If you really dig through the category and exclude all the urban fantasy books that are trying to like slide in a place where they can get a higher ranking, there's not a lot of superhero novels. Most of them are comics or graphic novels. So from the beginning, that was kind of different and weird. And it has made it a little hard to market, right? Because people who read books don't normally think about superheroes as, something to read a book about. And then people who read comics, who do read about superheroes all the time, are used to comics and not gonna necessarily go to a prose novel for that.
Well, let me tell you something. We've read quite a few of these superhero novels on the
Yeah.
yeah.
A fair number of the superhero novels that are actual superhero novels, I'm guessing you know this from the way you're saying that, are erotica. Like legit erotica.
There's a lot of harem.
Yeah.
No, actually,
superhero
we were talking. We avoided those. We were talking
No,
about.
it's more the erotica that involves food.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not familiar with those, and I don't think I want to be.
We were reading on air segments in the previews from the various novels from DC and Marvel.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
They're awful.
They are. They're god awful. And I say the bit about food because I eventually coined the term Simone's Law, because Gail Simone has this horrid habit of putting in inappropriate references to and indulging in food in her books. And all of these books included that in there too, like scenes that didn't mean anything, of just like an orgy of food. It's like, why are you telling me this?
That's very bizarre.
I can promise there's no food orgies in Heroes Unleashed.
Okay, good.
So one big differentiator right there. No food orgies.
Well, like Faith. Remember,
Faith.
we read the Faith novel out loud. It was like
No.
every other scene was food.
Actually, I was thinking of I'm Not Starfire.
Oh, God, no, no.
And I haven't kept track of the prose much coming from DC and Marvel, but the comics they're putting out these days are just I don't even know what to say. Like they're so obsessed with message fiction and SJW crap that like the decision to make Superman gay all of a sudden, like what? Where'd that even come from? And then they're surprised that it's their lowest selling comic ever. Like I don't, not that I even have anything against gay characters, right? Despite being Catholic, like I've written stories with gay characters in them, and I've watched them because they're real. They exist in the real world. I'm not going to pretend they're not real. Writing stories, right? It's dumb, but like it seems they're so much more obsessed with somebody's sexuality than actually just telling a decent story about anything that's fun. Superman is supposed to be fun, okay? I'm 40 years old. I've been familiar with Superman for decades, and he's had a lot of different incarnations and he's had a lot of changes over the years, but if Superman's not fun, there's no point. You're doing something wrong. And so that's been a definite it's been a definite part of what we've set out to do about that. As far as things that set it apart, it depends a little bit on which subseries within Heroes Unleashed you're at, because every author in there has really brought their own take to it and done some interesting things. Overlook by John Mollison has one of the most interesting time travel things I've ever seen. It's unique and it's different and it's just kind of, I've never seen that done. It's just unique. I know Benjamin Chia's work, Hollow City and the rest of the series in there. People like to talk about diversity, but having an actual ethnically Chinese author from Singapore writing, there's a very different flavor to that than what you'd get even from an Asian American author, right? It's just a unique look at it, and it's set in America. It's set in California, largely in Chinatown there, but it's just a different way of looking at it, and it's kind of hard to even describe unless you just read the book. Like an American wouldn't write it the same way. We have one that is coming up soon on the docket from Nas Jondi, one of our newer authors. He's from Malawi, Africa, and again, there's just a different perspective when it's written by an actual African. Not trying to pitch the diversity thing, but like actual diversity, not just, hey, there's somebody out there who's like a different color, his skin color is different, but hey, there's some actual different perspective here, and it's kind of cool. It just lends it a different flavor. And then, you get other stuff. Like, I'm going to go back to Morgan's for a minute, the event, the Rampage that she mentioned. That's the subject of the prologue for her book. And I challenge anybody listening, no matter how manly you think you are, right? Read that prologue without crying. I challenge you. I really challenge you. If you can get through it without that, then I'll be impressed.
Gauntlet thrown.
Gauntlet thrown, and I'm not afraid of it because it really is that. It's that good. And I've heard the same thing from plenty of other people. I'm not just pimping my wife when I say that. It's really that good. So it just kind of depends on which of the authors you're looking at and which series.
And if we're talking about over like the mainstream publishers, is that none of us hate superheroes. None of us hate the type of people that like to read superheroes.
That's a really big part of
it. I wanted to take superheroes and almost write an epic with it, make it the deep emotions and the tragedy and all of that, more like I mean, the main hero, his name is Achilles, but more like you would see in like the old Greek epics. Like make it more mythological than it has been, I guess, while also making it more realistic at the same time, which is a weird combination. But that was kind of what I was going for.
Very cool. So, just to give a better understanding of what each book perhaps offers, you mentioned Achilles is one of the main superheroes. Is this a case of there's like a main pantheon and they are like untouchables, nobody can write from their perspective, or do you have either yourself or other writers who are writing from their perspective?
So each of the authors created their own characters and settings, and they're basically in charge of them. But it's not like you're not allowed to write their characters in and have them. In fact, we've encouraged it. It's mostly been as smaller parts, but there has been an awful lot of respect and communication between the authors. Like if I'm going to use your character, I'm going to talk to you about it and make sure I get the character written right and do it in a way that fits with everything else. And that's one of the things I meant when I was talking earlier about how well it's turned out. The way the authors have really gone to town with using the stuff from each other and making it all kind of fit together. There have been a few things like Morgan's character Achilles has been worked into John Mollison's series in a couple of really interesting ways. Smaller parts, but he's in there, and
that's mostly in the third book, which isn't published yet. But yes,
but it's coming, yeah. And it's there's just some cool tidbits in there of how they've done it. So no, there's not a you can't touch my character. But there's been a lot, like we didn't even ask for it, but the authors all just showed each other that kind of respect. And we're like, hey, I want to use your character. Can you chat with me for a bit? And everybody's just jumped at it. It's been great.
That's wonderful.
I keep meaning to go, like, so the appearances run the gamut from, here's a little Easter egg. So a lot of people didn't realize this because she's called something slightly different, but Penance from Paula Ritchie's novel is in Heroes Fall as Penny, and mine was published actually years before Paula's ended up being published. So we worked that in, and we need to do like a little webpage that like lists, here's all, this character appears in these books, and sometimes they're an Easter egg, kind of just like mentioned in passing to see whether you catch it, and sometimes they're a pretty big deal. That my big villain is actually in book 2 of Chia's books. And then I know he's bringing other ones into his other books, and everybody's kind of doing the same thing. So it's kind of like a big sandbox that all of us are getting to play in, which is actually a lot of fun.
Do you have a wiki that shows like where all the different characters show up, or kind of story trees showing where they fall in relation to each other, as far as this story takes place before this story or after this other story?
We have an internal wiki for that I have actually been lax on updating, but this got like the basics in it for everybody to check. I want to do one. The newer books are going to be published with a timeline in the front, because like rather than giving years like 2027 or whatever, we actually have internal years so we can keep track of it, but we don't put it in the books because we don't want it to like age. But the rampage is the defining event. So like we said, okay, the rampage was here, and then this story is plus or minus this many years from the rampage. So like mine, which is the first one, is 20 years after the rampage, but John Mollison's take place 10 years after the rampage, which is 10 years before mine. And then there's a second event called the Rebirth, where there's more superheroes that are made. that'll come at the end of my series. And but Paula and Benjamin and Nos's heroes are all post that event, so they're like plus 5 years from my book or something like that. So it does kind of range a big time frame, and we need to try and make that clear.
we really should put together a public wiki for it. It's been discussed, it just hasn't been done yet. But it would be a good thing to add.
Well, it's good that sounds like you already have it pretty well laid out anyway. It just needs to be made public. But that's good that you have that, so that as the stories grow and develop, you don't start running into problems.
And I will also say that the books, the individual series from the different authors all stand alone quite well. So you don't actually have to read all of them. You don't actually have to know what's happening in any of the others to enjoy them. But there's an extra layer of enjoyment you get if you read the whole, if you read them all and are tracking what's going on. So.
And I know you said that Silver Empire is not accepting submissions at this time, but since this is a sandbox world, is this a invite only sort of thing? Or if like, somebody was to really buddy up to you and go, hey, by the way, I have an idea.
Well, Thomas Plutarch is the one you have to talk to, apparently.
Oh.
Thomas Plutarch is actually not a real person. If you click through on Amazon and read his bio, that should become pretty clear. We created a fictional character who actually exists within the Heroes Unleashed world, to be the co-author to all of the books, because what we wanted to do was basically we wanted to help make the books more discoverable for Amazon. So having them all have a common author makes that work better for selling the books. But we didn't want to just hide all the authors' names and just put them out under a pen name. We didn't think that was fair to them, and we wanted them to have the credit for the books they'd done. And then we just hit on having him be somebody who existed in the world as a fun way to do it, and that actually has been fun. He actually appears in the books, Thomas Plutarch, in more than one place, and it is fun the way, we kind of put him together and created him as a lark, and then we started having authors asking us questions about him because they wanted to put him in the books. So, that's been really fun too.
That's really clever.
Yeah, they're always messing with it, I guess, but there's no publisher page. Like, you can't go look at a publisher page on Amazon.
Yeah, that's true.
So, like, someone could have read all of one series in Heroes Unleashed and not even realize that, there was all the rest of this universe to go discover. So, but more directly for now, unless Russell corrects me, is it's mostly invite only. At some point in the future, we actually have probably at least a year's worth of Heroes Unleashed novels that are done or almost done to release, but we may open up to like pitches in the future. But for now we're really overloaded.
we're really overloaded. So for the moment, it's invite only. We would like to open that up to more authors, and I don't actually, I don't mean this in any self-serving way, but for those who want to see other authors in it, really is a case of buying more books helps make that happen faster. There's just only so many resources to go around.
So will there ever be the possibility of an actual graphic comic tie-in, or at least like maybe a one-shot that introduces comics readers to the prose world?
We have absolutely discussed it, and honestly, we're just so swamped with the books right now that it hasn't risen high on the priority stack yet. But it's definitely been discussed, and all of us think it would be a great thing to do.
I'd really like to do it.
we'd all really like to do it. It's just like I said, it hasn't risen to the top of the priority stack yet, and there's only so many resources to go around. So keep your eyes open and fingers crossed, and maybe hopefully we'll get to it at some point in the not too distant future.
Okay, another question I have for you guys. You're not doing mainstream woke fiction. You're the alternative. You're doing the kind of stuff that upsets people, even though there's nothing offensive about it.
Well, sometimes there is.
Well.
You've had John Delarose on your program. You know better than that.
Okay, well,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Oh, you
Yeah,
say
but-
that, and his books are not offensive. John is offensive.
No.
Well, John goes out of his way to be
I love
provocative.
I read.
There you go.
I mean, I
It's
co-wrote a book
provocative.
with him.
So, how do you get the word out? How have you been primarily building your audience?
It is a very difficult problem. I'm just going to say that out loud, and say that part is selling books in current year of any kind is actually really tough. There's been some stuff going around on Twitter in the last couple weeks about how few books a couple of big name woke authors have been selling, and a lot of the guys on Twitter are looking at all this going, ha ha ha, look how little these guys sell. And yeah, there's a part of me that wants to jump on that bandwagon too, but the honest truth is that those are the guys with serious money behind them, and they're not selling a huge amount of books either. It's a tough market right now.
I've got to ask.
There's a lot of competition with other entertainment, TV, music, YouTube, Twitter. There's a ton of other stuff out there, and it's tough to rise above the noise and get seen. We've had some level of success at that, not as much as we'd love to. Obviously, we'd all love to be, writing absolute bestsellers and getting, Netflix shows made out of our books and, retiring. But, we've done a lot of just trying to get out where we can and get the word out where we can. Finding people who enjoy those kinds of books and getting them, to help spread the word. Word of mouth it is one of the best things we've had. All the traditional stuff too, with varying degrees of success of, traditional advertising and other things. You name it, we've probably tried it. But it's an uphill battle. It's a really big uphill battle for any new author. It's a tough space to enter and a tougher space to succeed at. There's no doubt.
All right. Well, all of you listening, all 25 of you right now, and the next 100 and some that will later on, all of you listening, this is why, one, you've got to actually go tell people about the books like these that you like. Two, if you like an author who's indie, review their book on Amazon.
Mhm.
That makes massive difference. You would not.
It is impossible to overstate how big a deal that is. Like, reviews are absolutely huge, even if there's hardly any text in it or anything. Massive thing. If you like an author, review their stuff.
What I always tell people is, look, I don't care if you just go say 5 stars, this book was awesome balls. Just do it.
Absolutely.
It makes a difference.
It really, really, really does.
And last, this is why all of you have got to tell your friends about Wordcraft, where they can find all the authors that aren't woke, where you can, nobody's buying SIFWA books anymore. So, they want to know where it is. This is why we started this show. Let everyone know we exist.
Yeah, we actually have sold more than the former president of SIFWA. So we've got, that going for us.
I was actually going to ask that. I mean, finding out how much Scalzi sells, and I'm like, I sell better than Scalzi. That's great.
Yeah, it was kind of nice from that sense of, yes, we sell more than a large number of the authors on this list and everything. But it's a tough market, and I'm saying that largely for the benefits of new authors who are coming in. you know, if you're looking to break into this space, the only way you're going to succeed is to be prepared for the long haul, to get in it and just stick with it and fight and fight and fight and fight, because it's not an easy win.
Let's see. Janelle says, my theory about books not selling well these days is because the market has been oversaturated with woke, overly sexualized, YA-themed hot garbage that people have lost interest in reading.
You know, that brings me to another question. So far, these days, we've gotten to the point where the books are filled with nothing but strong, what was it? Strong, independent females who can do everything great, involved in debaucherous relationships, and it's being sold to teens.
Or engaging in things like throwing a temper tantrum and shanking a store manager, and that's something we're supposed
Heroic,
to,
yeah.
you know, applaud.
Or what?
Sorry, I missed the question.
So the question being, what do you offer in that regard? How many of your titles are, YA appropriate?
We have a couple. It's not been our primary audience, the YA. Paula Ritchie's book Penance in the Heroes Unleashed universe is YA. And El Jaji Lamplighter, we sell her books through our store. Those are YA. And we've got one or two others. It's not been our primary focus, and I'm going to go back to the comment there. I have to scroll back a bit so I can see it for a second. I think Janelle, I hope I'm saying your name right, and I'm really sorry if I'm not. But I think there's an awful lot that you're touching on in that comment that is either true or at least partly true. And I can back some of this. We've been at this for a few years now, so I have a fair amount of actual data behind the scenes. I can tell you several things that are definitely contributing. The fiction that has been put out for the last several decades is overwhelmingly female-centric. And
I was going to ask next about that, but go ahead, continue.
And there's been a large feedback loop going on there. So I think that it started out because I think that what happened is originally the publishers started to see, hey, women are buying more books than men, and started to target that, or at least partly that's why they were doing it. But the problem that you get is if you don't put out fiction for the men, then they stop reading. And whatever you think about, anything else, as a general rule, men and women have different tastes in what they read. There's overlap for sure, but they have different tastes. And what has happened now is that the overwhelming majority of the fiction being put out is being put out by women for women. You'll hear everybody talk about how oppressed female authors are. But if you look at the statistics of published fiction, if you look at the numbers of submissions they get, the submissions they get are overwhelmingly from men. And the new authors that they pick to publish are overwhelmingly women. And the answer is that in the current publishing space, male authors are largely the ones not getting their voices heard. And now, some of that is because part of what's happened is they have actually chased the men out of books. The men aren't reading like they used to fiction. Underworld Dream, you are correct that the pushing that's happening in the schools and in the culture is pushing girls to read, and not so much with boys, and all of this stuff feeds together.
Can we be honest? The current culture hates boys.
The current culture hates boys. And that, we put out a lot of our fiction is specifically targeted at the male audience. It's a huge part of what we do. And part of the uphill fight that we've been facing is that they largely don't read anymore. And a large portion of it is because they've been chased out of the space, because so much stuff, they've been fed so much stuff that's that's not their stuff. And so we're having to go fight and win them back. And it is very difficult to do. We've had success at it. I've had a number of people I've talked to are like, I haven't read a fiction book in 10 years because nothing was any good. It was all girl-centered stuff. And then they pick up some of our stuff and some from a couple other indie publishers out there, or a number of other indie authors we know. And they're like, hey, this is the first stuff I've read in years that I didn't hate. And some of that is just that we're catering to that taste, and it's been neglected. But because it's been neglected for so long, the readers are not there. There's also a degree to which the wokeness is pushing people away. And then going back to Janelle's comments there, the market is very, very saturated with certain kinds of things, and it's very hard to find anything else inside all that noise if you go looking. And I'm going to tangent here for a minute to another topic which has been heavy in our discussions for the last few months, which is that Amazon started out being one of the godsends for indie authors, and if you're trying to be an indie author on Amazon today, it's a mess. It's an absolute hot mess of a system for authors and for readers. I challenge you right now. There are 10 of our books up on the screen right now that you can see. I challenge you to grab the title and the author from those 10 books, plug them into the search engine on Amazon, and see how many of them show up in the top 10 search results when you're putting in the actual exact title and the exact author. Their search system is so skewed by other factors right now that even if you know the exact product you want to find, it is an absolute pain to find the product, and it's just getting lost amidst a number of people. Some of them are doing tricks like Morgan was talking about earlier. If you go pull up the superhero category on Amazon, 90% of it is urban fantasy that the authors have just dumped in the category, and Amazon doesn't care. They're doing nothing about it. But there's also a fair amount of actual scams going on where people are putting together books that have basically no content, and they're scamming the Amazon algorithms. And Amazon's not doing a very good job of policing that either and getting it out of the system. And then Amazon's just making it hard to find stuff in their current system. And so and they've driven everybody else out of business. So there's nowhere else to even go to discover books. So there's a number of things that are contributing to the problem, making it very difficult. And I don't want to descend into what I'm hoping I don't offend a bunch of my friends now when I say this, but a fair number of indie authors will start listing this stuff and just whining about it. And I don't want to come at it from that perspective, but it is also the case that if you're going to do anything, you have to understand that this is how it is now, and you've got to get around and solve these problems if you want to move books. And it's not easy to do. It's just not.
Well, how do you know that Christopher Lonsdown's books come up immediately?
That's fantastic. I'm glad to know. His are quite good as well.
So, did you have a last question, or are we going to call it a night?
No, actually, he answered my question. That I was going to comment that for the last decade, I haven't bought a contemporary book that has a female protagonist because, as you said, they're all female-centric, and I'm not interested in that because none of those characters are actual characters. They're, cutouts for the reader to implant themselves in and say, pretend that that's them having these adventures, or they're, little Miss Perfects who can do absolutely nothing wrong. And that's boring. So I was going to ask, how do you avoid that? Well, you just told me that. Yeah.
And I will say I can recommend a number of books we've got that have either female main characters or high secondary characters that are very, very strong and very definitely not Mary Sue's. Morgan's book Heroes Fall is a great recommendation for that. Absolutely not a Mary Sue character, and it is a female main character. You know, people have differing tastes on what they like. Declan Finn's Love at First Bite series, his vampire novels, it's a male and female co-protagonists there. Very much not a typical character. You know, I think you can sum that up by saying she's a Catholic vampire. If you can square that circle, which he actually managed to do. And help me out, Morgan. We've got some others. What am I forgetting?
Well, there's Penance, Paula's.
Penance. Yeah, duh. How'd I
lead.
forget that one?
And Anne Margaret Lewis has a sci-fi series it's a space princess book, and her space princess is good in it. She's not a Mary Sue.
Yeah, that one's a great example. Her book's really good. I really liked that one a lot. Let's see. Oh, I'm looking at one right here on the page right now. The Origin K by Susan McPhail. You know, it's we got to redo the cover on that. That's actually literally the first novel we published back when we didn't know what we were doing, and so the cover does not match that book very well. But it is historical fiction set in 3rd century Persia, definitely in the same vein as a Prince of Persia kind of thing. Very, very strong female co-protagonist in that one as well, and worth checking out depending on what kind of thing you're into. So if you're looking for a non-Mary Sue character, we should maybe adopt that as a tagline. You will not find any Mary Sues here.
I bet it'll help. I mean, unfortunately, there are just it's hard to find a book that doesn't have a Mary Sue. And then I'm also including that with a male protagonist. I'm having a heck of a time finding a contemporarily written book where the male protagonists aren't Mary Sue's. And that's an odd one for me.
I was about to make the exact same point. I agree completely. It's very true.
Well, if you said when you see a book and it's got a female author's name or a female character, you're like, no.
When a female author or a female main protagonist, I tend to immediately turn it down unless the description can make me go, oh, okay, I'll give it a try. But it's been 6 years since I gave a book a try and found out I actually liked it.
Well, you also have a test that a lot of these books too many of these books keep failing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm curious now. I want to know what the test is.
And the test is the female protagonist shows up, some dork, jock, stereotypical meathead guy hits on her, and she kicks his ass.
That's a good test. That's an annoying thing.
Yeah, you guys, it makes me think of what that deleted scene from Captain Marvel where she just beats the shit out of a dude just for
looking. It's like, no.
Looking at her. I don't. Yeah,
exactly. Just to show everyone how tough she is.
When I was slush reading for Pseudopod back before they got totally woke, that was one of my unforgivable sins, was if the female protagonist runs into a guy and kicks his ass for no reason other than he just looks at her or says, "Hey baby." It's like, no, that's stupid.
Yeah, in real life you'd go to jail for that.
Mm-hmm.
Just saying. I mean, and for good reason. If a dude did that, he'd go to jail for it too. That's not acceptable. That's assault. That's a felony.
Or if she just an overreaction to something as simple as somebody noticing that you're human and that you're not ugly. Even if it's absolute disgust and it's all inner monologue, it's like, I now hate your character, I don't want to read this.
Oh man, I have a funny story related to that. So there's a scene in my book where I was trying to come up with, there's a scene in the book that's in the prison with the 2 prison guards and Achilles, And then Achilles' daughter is on the TV screen. And then one of the guards starts like saying really filthy things about, you know, the supervillain who's sitting right in front of him's daughter who is on the TV screen. And while I was trying to figure out, like, I'm like, okay, this needs to be like really bad what this guy is saying. And so I went on Twitter and I was like, hey, can you guys like tell me the absolute worst thing somebody could say about you, like in a cat call or, you know, and then I kept getting these responses back that were so pathetic. Like, oh, he told me I should smile more. And I'm like, I can't use any of this. Nobody is being actually filthy to you guys.
Like, that's the worst.
Morgan?
Yes.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I'm writing, well, I've got 2 books I'm writing. The second one is a guide for avoiding these kinds of cliches and problems in books and writing techniques. And I get into that scene and the cat calling. And I did actually go through and research all those catcalling videos and watched all of them. And found that the only thing they ever proved was that New York's a very, very rude city.
Oh, I have never. The first time I was catcalled in my entire life was in San Francisco. Like,
really?
yes.
There you go.
It has never happened to me, you know, where I live in backwards bumfuck Alabama. You know, but
Yeah.
like first trip to San Francisco, getting catcalled by the homeless guys living in the store alcoves.
We're not in a small town in Alabama.
No,
Our county has 500,000 people living in it. It's
I'm
a
just
decent
making fun
population
of people
zone.
who act like
It's
Alabama's backwards on everything. But
it's
like, yeah,
probably a manners thing.
There was a study done by some women's magazine where they did the video in different cities. And the things they were counting as catcalls were ridiculous. Stuff like, oh, well, you first, ma'am. And can I hold... this old man at a crosswalk offers his umbrella to a girl, and they count that as a catcall.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're counting manners as catcalling, then the South is screwed.
Yeah. Like,
But
you have bigger problems if that's a cat call.
I was so disappointed though, because it's like I don't think that way, and I haven't been catcalled a lot, so I'm like, okay, I need some stuff that's really awful that would make a dude really mad to listen to someone talking about his daughter that way. And everything I got back was just weak sauce.
And, you know, I can understand if, you're in prison, especially if the guard knows who you are, knows who the girl on the screen is, and is saying the most filthy things he can think of just to get you riled up. Yeah, I can understand that. But as far as,
But
women
I'm
in...
going to interrupt you because even there, the character does not go over and beat the tar out of people for it. He does something much funnier instead. But
and that's great. See that shows good writing, because everybody is expecting the easy thing, the action film thing, the go over and beat the tar out of the guard, or do something, even if it's not immediate, later, like beat the crap out of him, because, well, people don't have imaginations anymore.
And you are correct. It is much more fun when you don't do that. And I won't spoil it for anybody reading the book, but I quite enjoyed the way Morgan handled that situation.
Well, I mean, it was supposed to be a foil specifically in that scene because he's supposed to be this terrible guy with a bad temper, and then he does not react the way that one would expect him to it. And that was the point of the entire scene, actually. But
and I applaud you. I seriously, I applaud you that actually having good character development and good writing, it's rare. I hate to say it, it's rare.
My favorite things are characters, and it has been kind of disappointing in a lot of cases trying to read things, especially like, so I'll say all of my books have at least female co-protagonists in them, and part of that is because I'm a woman, so I'm like, well, I think, it's easier for me to get into a woman's head than a man's head. Not that I don't write men either, but I also kind of do it because it's like I don't get to see these characters in anything anymore, so I guess I'm just gonna have to write them myself.
That's cool. Actually, you are fulfilling a need. So thank you. I mean, the last book that I read with a female protagonist that I enjoyed, the story was great until the shoehorned in romance plot got introduced. And by shoehorned, I mean the plot came to a full dead stop for a third of the book to have her bitch out her boyfriend over a phone.
Love Pads the film?
Yeah, Love Pads the film, exactly. And I'm like, okay, I'm done. It's like, obviously somebody thought that having a romance was needed in this story, and it wasn't. And it's like, I'm done.
That is a problem. Part of the female-centric publishing is that now they publish all kinds of books that are functionally romance light. Like they have all the romance tropes, but they stick them in a different category. So, I guess women can feel more sophisticated or not be embarrassed that they're actually reading romance.
I think the ironic part is that they were going on and on for years. They weren't allowed in these boys' clubs, and they love superheroes and sci-fi and fantasy too. And they show up and they turn it all into crappy romance.
And
okay.
I was just gonna say a romance element is fine, but there's a very big difference between a romance element and like it becoming the whole reason for the story. And that's fine for some people. It's just not the reason why I'm reading books. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just back when I was a baby writer, when I was first starting to do things. We didn't even have Silver Empire, and SJWs were in their infancy. I was at Dragon Con, and they have a whole writing track at Dragon Con. So they got like 4 days of these panels, all about writing. And at the time, I must have been like 19 or 20. I can't totally remember now. I went to one panel, and the title of the panel was "I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar." And it was supposed to be about female authors, writing what they need. So I went and I sat down in that panel.
The topic of the panel was, what do women want in their
Yes.
fiction? Right? I remember this panel. I was there too. I know what story she's going to tell. Go ahead.
And so, he may tell it better than me, but we sit down in the chair and I'm waiting for this because, I'm going to be a woman author. And I was the type of person where, I would, even back then, there was like, well, I'm not sure I want to read a woman author because they're always doing the romance thing and everything. And so like, I just walked in that room all ready to hear about what all these other speculative fiction women authors were going to do, right? Sci-fi and fantasy. And literally, they start the panel, and this woman's like, and they introduce themselves, and then this author, she's like, okay, well, what women really want in their fiction is great sex. It's all about sex. And this is at Dragon Con. And I was just like, what?
It was the entire panel. There was like a whole desk full of female authors, and all of them, it was all about sex and what they wanted, and it was all sex. And it was not just sex. It was like, here's this crazy thing. Here's this crazy world I created with all these loopholes just so that we can have giant orgies every year. Right? Like it's like massive. I'm not exaggerating.
No.
I'm literally not exaggerating. And it was all of them, and this was their answer.
I was like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
This is not what I was expecting.
Trenton, I'll answer your question. Hero's Fall is by Morgan. Yes, it is by Morgan Newquist.
Yes, that's fine. I missed that. But and so yeah, that's a problem. It's been going back for a while. I was so horrified. I was like, oh man, if I'm not even gonna find that here, then where am I gonna find it?
When we were talking with John Delaroz, we were getting into the whole escape pod, pseudopod disaster, and that apparently what got Sifwa originally pissed off at him was him ripping on the
Artemis Rising.
Artemis Rising project from Escape Pod, or the Scape Artists. Kat was a slush reader at the time, so we talked to him when he was on the show, and she gave him the other side of the story. And the irony being, they had such a hard time finding, or do you want to tell it? You tell it.
Okay. Yeah, they were having such a hard time finding female authors that were decent to fill their special event, that they were just letting in anybody who claimed to have a vagina. And I remember there was a story that I just did a big nope. It was, as I said on the show, it was, I hate to admit it, but it was so bad. At the point I normally would have just stopped reading and gone on to something else, I continued to read because I wanted to see how deep the rabbit hole went, because it was doing all of my unforgivable sins, including, flipping out because a guy happened to look at her, or starting off with by saying I'm not crazy, you've got to believe me, and other things like that. And I wrote to the author and I even told them this is why I said no, to give some constructive criticism. And a month later, during the special event, I heard it because Pseudopod was an audio anthology where they would put out a new audio story every week. And I heard that story that I had said hell no to, and they had not edited it at all. They hadn't changed a word. They just turned right around and resubmitted it and got it approved because it was female.
The other one was that they got so desperate that they started actually running romance stories on a horror podcast.
Yeah, they did.
I just, the part that I find funniest about your story is that was John Delarose then. And if it was John Delarose now, he would have 100% claimed to have had a vagina so he could get a story in it.
That is true. Well, the J is for Jane, right?
Pull a Lauren Southern. Did you just presume my gender?
Yeah.
He would have.
For Joan Delarose.
You love John.
Well, okay, since we're talking about female characters and female writers, Hellgate and Summerstorm, what are these?
So, those are my urban fantasy book, which does have a little bit more of the female-led urban fantasy tropes in it, although I'm doing my own thing with it because I tried to write to market and apparently I can't follow instructions and do it properly. So
color outside the lines.
It's funny, but so the main character in that one, her name is Amelia, and I tried to make her as different from me as possible, except she's got ADHD, so I'm trying to write that into her. And she actually relishes, she knows she's hot and she relishes attention for it. I was trying to do that also as a different from all these female characters that are just offended that people are looking at her. She wants you to look at her. But it's a fairly typical urban fantasy, except that it's suburban instead of urban. It's the neighborhood watch. It's about a girl who moves in with her grandfather after her boyfriend kicks her out of her apartment, and she doesn't want to move back in with her dominating mother. So she moves in with her grandfather, and it turns out her grandfather is the head of a neighborhood watch, and it's not a normal neighborhood watch. He lives in a neighborhood that's on a hellgate. And so there's all kinds of fairy tale mystical creatures in there. And then when he gets sick, she has to take over for him. And so it's kind of like closest thing to is probably Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And
with the grandfather, I was going to say, is Shades of Lost Boys at all?
A little bit. He has dementia as well, which makes him extra fun. And if you're at all reading it thinking this is not real, he's completely based off of Morgan's grandfather.
He's
absolutely that awesome.
100% my grandfather. And and it's part of what I ended up doing the dimensions in there to be both a thing, he's telling her the truth the whole time, but she just totally doesn't believe it because he's just got dementia and nobody listens to him. But but also, just to add a very I feel like there's not a lot of depth to these kind of novels. And then when you start dealing with a relative that has dementia, which my actual grandfather did, it gets really, kind of bittersweet and deep and weird sometimes. And I wanted that layer in it too. So
is this a kind of a thing where she is introduced to this fantasy fairy tale demon world, and dementia grandpa teaches her the art of demon slaying or something? Or
yes and no. I mean, that's the general trope. She's mostly on her own. And we've got some Arthurian legends sort of things that come in the second book. And there's a fairy there's a little bit of the love triangle thing, which I'm doing, but not too bad. There's a fairy across the street and then a ghost hunter next door, and they get into all kinds of shenanigans together. Like I said, I was trying to go for something that would actually fit in the very female reader targeted urban fantasy sort of thing right now, but I didn't really follow it very closely in the end.
Well, I think you'll appeal to females who are sick of reading really bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those books are fun. I wrote two of them in the amount of time it's taken me to write the second superhero novel. They're kind of like my palate cleanser because they're not as complicated or as dark. And Amelia's the pink-haired girl in the front, and I actually made a point of making her pink-haired to also be like not what you're expecting for her to have pink hair and not be an SJW. I did that on purpose too.
Nice.
So
Well,
I guess the whole thing is me just turning all of these tropes that I was trying to follow in an attempt to make money on their head, because I thought it was boring not to do that.
Well, cool. Well, I like the fact that even though you were trying to do something more mainstream, you couldn't. That actually, that speaks very well of it, actually. Well, that means that if having not read it, but one thing, I mean, I've never been one for stories where the romance is in the forefront, but one of the tropes of a book aimed at females is a love triangle. Everything aimed at females has a love triangle. And so when you say that you tried to do something mainstream, but you couldn't, that makes me think, oh, there might actually be some character development and some like real world consequences, or at least some real choices going on, and not simply for the not to have the Tenchi Muyo complex going.
I remember that show. Yeah, especially in the second book, she makes some massive mistakes, and I tried to make it, since it was a very like natural mistake to make, not that she was stupid, but because it's not interesting if everything goes the way it's supposed to go.
That's
So
one of my own personal pet peeves is characters who are just stupid.
Yeah.
That's almost worse than the Mary Sue where everything goes right, is when you have a character who all the stuff that goes wrong is just because they're dumb. Really drives me crazy.
And everybody else is happy to pick up the pieces every time they fuck up.
Right. It's much more fun when you have a character who does something smart and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Well, because then they actually recognize what happened, and there's possibility for changing course or learning.
And there's a real challenge, for them to face, not just, oh, look, anybody with half a brain could cakewalk through this.
No, I'm with you on that. And it's yeah, and I've been seeing it with both male and female protagonists. It's
Yes.
just it's more shoved in your face, unfortunately, when it's females. So I'm so glad to hear that your books don't have that. To put it bluntly. There was a particular contemporary book. It was a sci-fi book I read. What it's called, I couldn't tell you. I know it was called The Adept. Yeah, try to locate that. But it was about 2/3 of the way through the book that I realized the first act isn't over yet. I'm still in the first act, and I'm 2/3 of the way through the book. And all we've done is skip merrily through the woods, making light banter as we go, and getting into scrapes that are easily gotten out of. Why am I reading this? And it was a male protagonist, and the whole point was that it was a Mary Sue. And the only reason why I had read that far was because the writing was actually good, but good writing only takes you so far. When you realize you're reading a 300-page book and you're 200 pages in and you're not out of the first act, there's something wrong. Anyway, I'm just bemoaning with good creators the fact that unfortunately you guys are unicorns as far as good writing, and more people need to know you exist, because it's an absolute travesty that the other stuff is getting more shelf space.
I do all the editing for us, and not like saying that I'm the best editor ever, but then I go and I read traditionally published stuff, and some of it is good stuff, like the book actually isn't that bad, but I just I could mark this thing up in streams of red if it was something that somebody sent to me. I don't think they're really doing very much editing anymore when they put things out the door.
I don't think they are either. I mean, some of them, it's like, let alone editing, does somebody just plain know how to put together a sentence?
It's a problem. I will tell you, having worked as a publisher now for a while, we've gotten some stuff that's incredibly bad. Like, you have no idea how bad some of this stuff is.
Well, if she was a slush reader, I'm sure she
as a slush reader, you
I have a good idea. Yes.
For the folks in the audience, like, holy cow, it's just and literally to the point of we've had a few where it's like this person can't string a sentence together, much less a paragraph or a story. And I'm not even talking about like I don't like the story, or I don't like it's incoherent. We've had stuff that it's amazing, and how much it is. It can get pretty crazy. One thing I will say, as far as other stuff out there that is in the same vein, that's going to give you stuff that's not woke and fun. Most of our authors, not all, but most of them have other books that are not published by us. I would highly recommend checking those out, even though I don't make a dime off of them. They've got plenty of good stuff on their own. And there are some other guys out there that you can go take a look at that have some great books that are not woke. I know my friend Rob Crucy has some good stuff. I'm drawing a blank. Morgan, help me out for a second. We know lots of people. Why am I brain farting?
Travis Kokorin.
Yeah, good call there with Travis.
He writes hard sci-fi. Carl Gallagher.
Carl, good choice there.
This is not a person, but Rob Crucy and a couple other people run a website called Upstream Reviews, which is kind of trying to do the same thing you guys are with WordCraft, just like targeting, posting, and reviewing the indie books and trying to bring attention to them. So like if you go there, they also post sales for when they pop up for old sci-fi novels and stuff, if you need a copy of them on Kindle or something like that. So you can find some more over there.
And if you're friends of mine and I've left your name off, I'm mostly trying to stick to people who are not just friends, but where I've actually read their book and can say something positive about it. So Rob Crucy sold me on his Vikings in Space series. that tagline alone got me hooked, and it was totally worth it. The Iron Dragon series. But there's other stuff out there. We're not alone. The big problem is that these guys are facing the same discoverability problem we are. It's just hard to get the word out there. So if you've got an indie author you love, spread the word and help them out. They need
And
it.
get them
I
on the
promise.
show.
And what?
And bring them on the show. Send
Bring
them
them on
our
the
way.
show. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we are going to call it a night. We've definitely been on for almost an hour and a half. So, final thoughts, last things you'd like to share with people, and where can everyone find you to?
Thanks for having us. First is my final thought. It's
Yeah.
just as much fun as it was last time I was on. Love chatting with y'all. I'm Russell Newquist. You can find. I don't have as many books. I'm too busy publishing other people's to keep writing my own. But my book War Demons, it's on Amazon. And all of our books by everybody we've mentioned, everybody we've said tonight that's published by us, all of those books are either on Amazon or also available through our own web store at silverempire.org. And
You should pitch our book club.
Yeah, we thank you for reminding me. We run a book club on our website. It works kind of like Audible. You can sign up at different tier levels and you get credits every month. It's a recurring subscription, so you get charged for your credits every month, but the credits never expire. And you can use them. The base price is 1 credit gets you an ebook. 4 gets you a paperback, and 9 gets you a hardcover. So you can sign up at plans that are based on that. But if you sign up for the ebook plan that gives you 1 credit a month, you don't have to use your credits for ebooks. You could save up 4 months and buy a hardcover or buy a paperback instead. And if you got the hardcover plan, you could use your credits to buy a bunch of ebooks instead if you wanted. So you can mix and match, and we put out new books most months. Not every month do we get a new book out, but we have a pretty decent back catalog now of about 50 or 60 books at this point that you can use your credits on as well. And works out to be a decent discount over list price. And you also get, if you sign up for that, you also get 10% off if you buy a book. Just buy it with money. So,
and this is our solution for kind of trying to break away from Amazon and have our own platform.
Right.
So,
it's a nice option. I know I saw somebody in the comments earlier, forgive me for forgetting who mentioned that they were a book club member. Thank you. We love you for that. We really, really do.
Yeah, it means a lot of things as a publisher. It means we're not beholden to Amazon. It means us as a publisher and your favorite authors get more of the cut of your money instead of it going to Amazon. The authors, the money comes through to us sooner instead of Amazon sitting on it for 2 months. Like, there's a lot of things that buying directly through us actually makes a big difference in helping us instead of buying through Amazon. So,
and if you've been a member and you've suffered through the issues we've had getting print books out, we are really sorry. We've had a lot of trouble with our printer during the COVID, since COVID hit. We're doing the absolute best we can on that. But the ebooks are instant. You'll get them as soon as you sign up. So, and if you sign up, you get your first month, you get a free credit, so you can grab a free ebook just for signing up.
And even if you do get the book from their website or their book club, still review it on Amazon.
Please, yes, very much. And on our website, if you can. They both really help. They really, really helps make a difference.
Well, finally, before we call it a night, everything you've heard tonight is linked in the description, so you don't have to worry about rewinding and finding it. All down there, along with a few other links. And anything else?
No, go check them out, and yes, definitely let them know what you think if you do purchase one of their books. Reviews are so important, and with that said, also check out J.Ishiro's books on Amazon. Check them out today, and if you've already done so, we would appreciate reviews as well.
Yes, if you want to read something that isn't woke, that's great science fiction, that has wonderful characters and is going to change your life forever, I recommend you read Scars by J.Ishiro Finney, available on Amazon.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Russell and Morgan, for joining us this evening. And
Thank you.
we will see everyone next week.
Thanks for having us.